Hey everybody, so there is no One Piece chapter this week, and instead I'm going to be talking about Sanji versus Zorro. Now, Sanji versus Zorro has been a discussion that, to my surprise, has reached cancerous levels. In fact, it's gotten so cancerous that I think now it's actually comparable to what the Naruhina versus Narusaku debate used to be when Naruto is going on. The theme of both topics is pretty different, but the cancer level is the same. Now I'm going to approach this thing from different angles. I'm going to start talking about Zoro and Sanji as characters, then talk about their goals, and talk about their feats, and then talk about their strengths and weaknesses as characters, because believe it or not, both of these characters are not perfect. In fact, what I think is interesting is that because of those flaws, both of these characters complement each other so well because their flaws seem to be on opposite sides of the spectrum. You know, their issues are polar opposites. Now, when it comes to the One Piece fandom, I think that one of the reasons for why fans are so passionate about this discussion, about this debate, is because Zoro and Sanji have very different personalities, and since they're technically, they fall under the category of main characters, when you're constantly exposed to two characters that have very different personalities, people are going to gravitate more towards one than the other. And that usually happens to be the character that you can relate to or identify the most, or the character that you admire and actually respect the most. Now, to be fair, this debate, much like the Naruto shipping's couples debate, wasn't something that the fans made up like out of nowhere. It's not like it came out of thin air. Both authors, Kishimoto and Oda, have actually implanted the story with this rivalry, at least to some degree, in order to engage fans. And you can see this because this Zoro versus Sanji rivalry, the original argument actually happens in Arlong Park. And Arlong Park is one of the first arcs of the story. And so even though the discussion can get pretty cancerous at times, it's not 100% the fans' fault. This is evident even from looking at the way that Oda decided to distribute these characters' strength. If you look at their fighting styles, Sanji uses kicks, he uses his legs to fight, whereas Zoro uses his arms and swords. So you literally have this yin and yang dynamic of upper body strength versus lower body strength. Now, the first time these two characters confront each other actually gives us a pretty good indicator of what the main problem is. And the main problem, the reason why they go at it back and forth is just it's like a preference issue. So what happens the first time they fight is that they're in Arlong Park, and at the time, Nami was being accused of killing Usopp. Zoro asks Nami, where is Usopp? And she at that point, Nami's just, kind of like trying to push her friends away so that they don't stay in Arlong Park. And then Zoro begins to question her, and, she's just kind of just being rude, just very rude and very apathetic towards the possibility of Usopp being dead. So Zoro is like, okay, I've had enough, and he's running towards her, grabs his blade, he's about to slash her, and then Sanji butts in, and he's like, are you serious, Roronoa? Are you really going to attack a woman? Is that part of the swordsman code? And so they start getting angry at each other, but I think the main point here is that this is a very clear example of Sanji's code clashing with Zoro's code. Because the truth of the matter is that Sanji values women just for the sake of them being women more than Zoro does. Whereas Zoro tends to value honor more than Sanji does. And this isn't right or wrong, this is just kind of like, it goes back to the way they were raised. Zoro was raised in a dojo where discipline and merit were a constant part of his routine, and it just so happened that his biggest rival, his biggest challenge was a girl, and he made his mind up from very early on that he was not going to treat her special, that she did not deserve special treatment just for the sake of her being a girl. Whereas Sanji grew up in a restaurant under the guidance and training of a very generous, very chivalrous chef that taught him to respect women above all else. But even if you go back before that, I think Sanji's favorable disposition towards females also stems from the fact that he grew up in a family where the males were very abusive towards him, and the females actually showed him kindness. And so that stems from, I think, it primarily also stems from Sanji's relationship with his mom and also with his sister. And so if you look at it from that perspective, I think it's very clear to conclude that one of the major character differences between these two is that Sanji happens to be more sensitive than Zoro. In fact, now that I think about it, Sanji could very well be one of the most sensitive members of the crew. And this is evidenced by not just some of the dialogue that we get in the story, in the manga, but also just by looking at the type of hockey that both of these characters specialize in. According to Oda, Zoro specializes in armament hockey, which tends to be more offense and attack related, versus Sanji, who specializes in observation, that happens to be more perception related. Now here's the thing about Sanji being sensitive, okay? And this is real talk. Unfortunately, because of societal and cultural norms, because of some social standards that are, for the most part, BS, and because of gender roles, being sensitive is typically something that is frowned upon, especially when it comes to males. So I can definitely see and understand why a lot of people would tend to gravitate towards liking Zorro more than Sanji as a character. However, being sensitive, or sensitivity in general, is not a weakness. It's actually a strength if you know how to use it properly. And I'm going to be going back to that point in a bit, so just hang tight. But before that, I need to talk about Zorro and Sanji's goals. For the 0.01% of you that may not know this, Zorro's goal is to become the world's greatest swordsman, whereas Sanji's goal is to find the All Blue. Now let me ask you this, do you see a difference in the phrasing, in the structure of those sentences? Being the world's greatest swordsman seems to somehow automatically require some type of physical prowess, strength-related, power-related combat feat, whereas finding the All Blue does not. Now that doesn't mean that Sanji can't be simultaneously strong and also find the All Blue. In fact, just thinking about where this place of legend could possibly be located in seems to imply the opposite. However, it does mean that Sanji's goal, his dream, his main priority, the reason for why he's on this journey to begin with, doesn't require him to be the best, strength-wise, in any physical activity. So ultimately, Sanji's goal, and these are the facts, Sanji's goal requires less physical and mental discipline than Zorro's goal does. And you can pretty much tell that this is the case based off of some quotes that the characters have said throughout the series. When it comes to Zorro, two quotes come to mind. There's one quote where he says, and by the way, this Zorro quote is actually very, very similar to the one that Luffy delivers in the very first episode of the anime when he's talking to Kobe about becoming king of the pirates. Luffy says, "I decided a long time ago that I was going to be king of the pirates. If I have to die fighting for that, then I die." And then Zorro's quote says, "When I decided to follow my dream, I had already discarded my life," which pretty much states that both of these characters have contemplated the possibility of dying in their journey to achieve their dream, and they're actually fine with that. Now, Zorro actually has another goal-related quote that speaks volumes towards the discipline aspect that I was mentioning a while ago. So in Arlong Park, I think Zorro, he's fighting Hachi, and he says something like, "A wound that will make an ordinary man go unconscious, I'm not going to lose to it. A wound that will kill an ordinary man, I'm not going to lose to it. Because in order to face somebody who's extraordinary like Mihawk, in order to come face to face with one who is extraordinary, I can't allow myself to be ordinary." And unfortunately, this is where some of the wobbly writing for Sanji's character comes into play. Because if you take that quote from Zorro, all right, and you look at how Sanji expresses himself about finding the All Blue, about his dream, pre-time skip, he was very enthusiastic about it, which is great. He was joyful about it. He's like, "Hey, have you heard about the All Blue? It's this legendary sea, this legendary mass of water somewhere in the open where all fish of all four blues come together." And by the way, this is just a reminder, but I've seen people think that his dream has nothing to do with cooking. It has everything to do with cooking. The reason why he wants to find this sea is because if he can find a place where all the different fish from the different seas come together, he can put a restaurant there and use these fish as ingredients. So it is cooking related. So he's very passionate about this. But then at one point, the crew arrives at Fishman Island and Sanji runs into some mermaids, and this is what he says. The mermaids are somewhat flirting with him at this point, and he says, "I found it. This is my All Blue. I hit the jackpot." And I know it's supposed to be there for comedic purposes. It's supposed to be humorous and taken as a joke. But can you imagine either Luffy or Zorro saying something similar to the effect of like Zorro saying, "I don't need to face Mihawk anymore. I don't need to fight any more swordsmen." Like, just as a gag, like, "I'm the best swordsman in the world." No, Zorro would never say that. And so this is where I think as a fan, you have to make your mind up about whether you find these types of Sanji gags endearing, likable, funny even, or straight up annoying. Because again, Sanji being thirsty and flirtatious and putting women on a pedestal. That's part of his character. That's part of the character that Oda has designed him to be. Now, if you're asking me personally, I think it just depends on the context, because there are some funny moments with Sanji that involve him, having those hard eyes and stuff, where I actually do laugh because it's genuinely funny and the timing is great. However, there are some other moments where it does kind of get under my skin, and I'm like, I think this was out of place. I think this joke we could have done without. So it just depends on the context, at least for me.
Now, Zoro's gag, on the other hand, is that he constantly gets lost due to his poor sense of direction, and also that he primarily just cares about booze. But I find that, generally speaking, people are more accepting of those gags than they are when it comes to Sanji's gag. Now, we've already talked about how some people may perceive Sanji's sensitivity to be an issue, okay? But when it comes to Zoro, and this is primarily post-time skip, I've actually seen more and more fans complain about Zoro having the opposite problem that Sanji has, which is that people are getting fed up. Some fans are getting kind of tired of Zoro being a total hard ass, or just being very aloof and, sort of like distant, not engaging, maybe a little bit too cold for some fans. And he also gives out this vibe that he's too cool for school, if you know what I'm saying. And this relates to, actually, like, if you look at his post-time skip feats, it seems like he's bored, like, throughout most of them. Like, when he's fighting people, like, whether it's fighting Hyozo and he's just like, you couldn't even kill my boredom, whether it's cutting Monet without Haki, just very casually. Even when it comes to Pika, it just seems like that those feats are kind of like beyond him already. Like, he's already surpassed that limit. So you kind of get the feeling that he's kind of like meh about this whole thing, that he's kind of done with it. Like, he's over it, right? And that's not a problem for a lot of people. In fact, some people actually admire him for that. Now, to be fair and to give a voice to those people who don't admire this trait from him, I guess the best way that I can explain their sentiment is, have you ever tried to befriend somebody who's like super cool all the time? Like, somebody who's consistently cool, and people know they're cool, and you know they're cool, and even that person knows that they're cool. Have you ever tried to befriend somebody like that? Because I have, and let me tell you, it gets boring quick. Like, what's your struggle? Like, how can I relate to you if you're just being cool all the time and you don't let me see, like, the human part of you?
I mean, granted, we could possibly get a flashback to his time training under Mihawk, and then we can get a glimpse of, like, the hell that he had to go through just to get to where he's at, and so that would help us just to relate a little bit more to that experience. Or maybe he struggles in Wano, and we get to see that human side of him again. Because when it comes to Sanji, like, I don't even have to tell you that Sanji has struggled. Whether it be him cracking his leg against Virgo, or momentarily stalling Doflamingo only to be saved by Law, or getting beaten up by his brothers, got shot into a wall by Daifuku, although he did take out Sheep's Head in Zou, so I will give him that. But, it's an uphill slope. It's been an uphill slope ever since the time skip for Sanji, or at least ever since Fishman Island, when he teamed up with Jinbei to defeat Wadatsumi. And he did also speed blitz Oven at one point, and he was also able to dodge an attack from Katakuri, even though Katakuri had used Future Sight to predict what was going to happen. So those are pretty amazing speed feats. So when it comes to speed, Sanji is good. He's good. It's just that I think fans would like to see more attack-oriented feats from him. And this is one of the reasons for why I think that Whole Cake Island, the writing of Whole Cake Island, in my opinion, I can describe it as being below average. There's other reasons for that. I've talked about it in other videos. But when it comes to Sanji, right, not only did Oda not give Sanji a one-on-one fight, but after the arc, Oda introduces this device in the form of a raid suit, which is going to be a potential power-up for him, which normally wouldn't be a problem, except by not giving Sanji a one-on-one fight in Whole Cake Island, by having him getting beat up by his brothers, by him getting shot at one point because he's trying to save Luffy, and then introducing the raid suit. It's like Oda is almost saying, like, he needs this. Like, he needs to use this in order to keep up. Which is why a lot of Sanji fans were actually against the idea of Sanji using the raid suit to begin with. Because again, it makes it seem as if Oda is saying, yeah, Sanji needs this device in order to keep up. Whereas Zoro hasn't even gone all out yet. Not only has he not gone all out, but he hasn't struggled ever since they entered the New World. Now, to be fair, we also got introduced to a new power item in Wano in the form of the Nirakitetsu, which I think, and a lot of people think, that sword is going to go to Zoro. So again, this is Oda keeping that back and forth alive. Raid suit for Sanji, Nidai Kitetsu for Zoro. Now there are some power inconsistencies when it comes to Zoro's character, and people usually just kind of brush them off, but I'm going to call them out right now. Because people were making such a big deal about Hawkins hitting him with the nails last chapter. But here are my observations. So in Water 7, Zoro literally gets stuck inside of a chimney. And it's only until Chopper shows up with a sword that he's able to bust out of there. It's like, it's ridiculous. Like at this point in the story, Zoro should be able to bust open through those bricks, even without a sword, okay? And what makes it even more ridiculous is that after he gets out of there, later on in the same arc, he's able to bust open through a tsunami alongside with Luffy's help and some firepower behind him. So this is just flat out ridiculous. I think it was just there for plot reasons. And then the second moment, and this actually happens in Fishman Island, which in my opinion is terrible because it's post-time skip. Zoro gets caught along with Brook and Usopp inside of a cage. And he doesn't have his swords at that point, but still, like he should be able, post-time skip Zoro should be able to bust out of those metal chains and out of that cage. It's ridiculous otherwise. Like you mean to tell me that post-time skip Zoro can't bust out of like metal? And people can say that he was holding back until they're blue in the face. It's still annoying. Another thing I've noticed is that even though Sanji has technically gotten wrecked more often than Zoro in the New World, there's been moments where I have noticed that Zoro actually needs help getting close to the target that he needs to attack. In Punk Hazard, Usopp gave him a boost with a plant trampoline thing in order for him to reach the dragon so that he could cut his head off, and then in Dressrosa, or Lumbus actually was the one who threw him over to Pika. And Sanji also has that kick called the Power Shito, which is a kick that he uses to give Zoro a lift so that he can reach distances that are high up in the air. It's a really cool looking combo. But now let's talk about Zoro and Sanji's allegiance towards the crew and Luffy. So this is unfortunate that I have to say this, but it's the truth. If it weren't for Whole Cake Island, Sanji would have just as much of a clean record when it comes to unwavering belief towards Luffy than the one that Zoro has. But because of Whole Cake Island, and because, again, I think because of the sketchy writing, that's no longer the case. In the arc, Sanji went through some pretty harsh external and internal conflict, and he kind of wavered, he kind of faltered, which is normal, it's fine. It's just kind of a very stark and sad contrast, especially when you compare it to what his attitude was pre-time skip. Like I remember during the training period when he was with Ivankov in the Okama Island, Sanji says, Luffy, I promise that if I survive this hell, I'll do everything in my power to try and make you the king of the pirates by offering you world-class support as a cook. So just hold on, because I will survive this hell. And it's not like Sanji just stopped believing and caring about his crew. It's more like he just didn't believe that Luffy could get him out of the situation that he was in. And I think the reason for why he couldn't believe in Luffy is because he didn't believe in himself. Whereas Zoro, on the other hand, has pretty much shown unwavering support and belief in Luffy ever since the start of the series. So it's been very consistent. He has a very clean record. And so far, the only condition that Zoro has for that unwavering belief and support towards Luffy is that Luffy respect himself enough to not allow other people to step on him, like what was kind of about to happen when he was going to beg Usopp to rejoin the crew. And even Sanji agreed with that, so much so that he actually supported Zoro's opinion over Nami's opinion in that discussion, which up until that point had never happened before. Now, from the perspective of a power-based discussion, I think the thing that ended up fueling this debate is that from very early on, there was a very clear order in terms of how the fights would go of each arc. Luffy would defeat the boss, Zoro would take on the second strongest, and then Sanji would take on the third strongest. It's just that I think some fans started thinking, wait a minute, just because Sanji takes on the third strongest each time, does that automatically mean that he can't take on the second strongest? So I think that's kind of like where it all started. And I also think that one of the reasons for why the discussion, kind of like begins to get into the cancerous realm is because it's very clear that Luffy needs both Zoro and Sanji to become king of the pirates. So they're both indispensable members of the crew. In fact, every member of the crew is indispensable. Luffy needs all of them to make his dream come true. And so if you have this belief, if this is like your core belief and understanding, all right, then that's why the discussion can get a little bit annoying at times. Now, even though I did talk about each of their own individual dreams and what they hope to accomplish by being part of this journey and being part of the crew, in Thriller Bark, both of these characters get confronted and actually state that they're willing to lay down their lives not just for their crew, but for Luffy's dream as well. Which is another way of them saying that Luffy's dream supersedes their own, which is astounding. It's incredible. I mean, in real life, you can't even get one friend to say that, let alone two. So props to Zoro and Sanji, man. Just great characters. Shout out to everybody in the crew, but this discussion is primarily about Zoro and Sanji. I will say this, though. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. My personal take, my personal opinion is that Oda does favor Zoro over Sanji. I do think that as an author, he likes Zoro more than he likes Sanji. But the good news is that just because he likes Zoro more than Sanji doesn't mean that you have to like Zoro more than Sanji. Or like Sanji more than Zoro. That's completely your choice, You get to decide. So choose wisely. That's all I can say. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you appreciated this discussion, I would highly, highly encourage you to leave a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more One Piece content. Comment down below with your thoughts about the points that I brought up. And yeah, just take care. Catch you guys later. Bye.